All right. I'm Melissa Myers. I own the Good Hop Bar and Bottle Shop in bright and sunny today, Oakland, California. And today I'm here to talk to Regan Long, who is the co-founder and brewmaster of local brewing company in SF, California. This is the Brewer to Brewer podcast from All About Beer. I'm super excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk to Regan about whatever brew house topics outside the brew house, all the goodness that the professionals in this industry are all part of. Before we get to that, though, please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media. And to support journalism in the beer space, check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We'll get into the conversation in just a moment, but first, this message.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Discover the advantage of using new and unique ingredients like lemon myrtle or Lapsang Souchong. First Tea has been working with brewers to introduce distinctive, high-quality botanicals for innovative craft beers. They focus on being direct, flexible, and fast. You can find more about First Tea's collaborations with brewers and tea ingredients by visiting blog.firsttea.com. That's blog.firsdtea.com.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
Okay, let's get into it. A little bit about my guest today. Regan Long, as I said before, is the co-founder and brewmaster of local brewing company in SF, California, a boutique brewery and beer bar that was located on Bluxom Street in the heart of San Francisco. Regan co-founded Local in 2015 as the first and only woman and LGBT-owned and operated beer bar in SF. She's been the owner-operator of Local nearly 8 years, blending her science degrees, physics, and oceanography with her creative side to design approachable beers and create a truly innovative and inclusive space, making Local one of the most popular destination spots in Soma. Local, unfortunately, was forced to close down due to a fire in December of 2022. We will totally get back to that later. But before founding Local, Regan worked as an oceanographic engineer, sorry about that, slaughtered, at an innovative radar company. She worked in business and strategy at a fast-paced fitness startup and in business innovation at the R&D wing of a luxury car company. She also served 3 years as a board member of the San Francisco Brewers Guild, taught business development classes at the Food Craft Institute, and has worked closely with the SF LGBT Center to brew an annual Pride beer, bring visibility and diversity to the LGBT and brewing communities. Regan, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks. Appreciate you inviting me. This is fantastic. It's good to talk to you.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to talk to you today. We actually met a long time ago. Actually a really long time ago. So I wanted to just see, do you remember the first time we hung out and had some beers?
I absolutely do. It was at Shotwell's in the Mission, and I was hounding you for information on being a brewer in the San Francisco beer scene. God, that probably had to have been like 2009 or something, maybe. Like, it was before I think that I was doing stuff at Thirsty Bear. I don't know, maybe it was a little bit after, but I would say, yeah, probably 2009, 10-ish. But yeah, I definitely remember our conversation, and I was picking your brain because you were actually one of the only female brewers at the time in San Francisco, and what better person to get information from, because I was an aspiring brewer at that time. So yeah, I do remember.
So that's actually one of the like the things that struck out for me. You know, I didn't know you. You just called me and said, "Hey, I was talking to Brian Hunt from Moonlight, and he said, hey, you should go contact this person."
Yeah.
You know, we got together and started chatting, and I think it was before Thirsty Bear because you were a home brewer, and I was like, "Yeah, your friends say your beer's good. Everybody's home brewing friend. You know, every home brewer's friends are like, I love your beer. It's great. You should open a brewery."
Totally, yeah.
And I was like, you should talk to people who don't know you.
Right. Yeah.
That's probably a better idea.
Oh, absolutely.
And yeah, I remember you were like, I got a lot of questions. I want to ask you a bunch of stuff. And but I wanted to chat with you a little bit because I remember it was at the time where like kind of thinking outside the box for breweries was just starting to happen, right? Like up until then, it was it's a brewery, it's a brew pub. There were no tasting rooms, either you sold your beer in package or you sold it through a pub. And, the smallest system was a 7-barrel. Everything was on a very much larger scale. And you were like, no, I got crazy ideas. I got all these ideas. And I think you came up with some pretty creative ideas to kind of get yourself from just a home brewer, right, up into the industry. Specifically, the one I remember the most, and there's probably some other ones, but the one I remember the most is you strapping a 5-gallon keg to your back and wandering through Dolores Park in San Francisco, giving people samples. And I was like, dude, that's illegal. You cannot do that.
Yeah.
Except that you weren't taking money. So it gets a little blurry about legality in that aspect. But first, the one thing I forgot to talk about is, what beer are you drinking right now?
Oh, great question. I'm actually drinking the Metal Carpal. I'm just like showing it to Melissa right now on the video. It's a collab with Laughing Monk that Jen Jordan and I actually, this is the third time we've brewed it. It's a black IPA. And weirdly, that was my first sort of like commercial or scaled up brew, was our 1776 IBA that we actually did as homebrewers. We scaled it up in 2010. This is a very different tasting black IPA than 13 years ago, but it's fantastic. I love it. Actually just won silver in the Best of Craft Beer Awards. So kudos to the Laughing Monk crew. They brewed this batch for the third time over there in, I think, January or something. So yeah, it's a great beer. What are you drinking?
I am drinking from Everywhere Brewing Company out of Orange, California, Deep Breaths Czech Pilsner.
Cool.
Nice and, zen and mellow, deep breaths.
Yeah, I love that you bring up a lot of the SoCal beers so that the rest of us can enjoy those. So
You're welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate
Actually,
it.
those runs are super fun, like,
yeah,
as a brewer, you're like, oh, I'll go talk to any brewer about anything. Let's go chat,
Absolutely.
So
It's great.
It's cool to get out of the Bay Area where we all have chatted forever.
Definitely. And bring in different beer from other places. That's how I feel like you learn and, get new ideas and taste different beers. So for sure. I love that.
Yeah. Well, so give us a little timeline of your homebrewer to brewery experience. I know you brewed. I know you got to brew at a couple breweries when you were still a home brewer, and I know you did some work with Thirsty Bear. And so, like, kind of give us that timeline for any homebrewers that are listening out there. I mean, everyone takes a different path, right? So you came up in the middle of, like I said, it was this innovative time where people were thinking outside the box and how do I get a brewery attention without actually having a brewery and stuff like that. So
yeah, it was a pretty cool time when I, sort of both me and my co-founder Sarah Fenton were like really interested in sort of like really looking at the beer scene and looking at how there was sort of we felt like there was kind of a gap in the market at the time. But yeah, just a little bit of background there. Like, yeah, so I came from originally I'm from Oregon. So I have a lot of those connections up in Bend, Oregon, and to the craft beer community up there. So I kind of grew up with craft beer, and that's what got me into home brewing. I'm a scientist by academic background, and one of the things that I always loved to do alongside kind of my day job was to blend my science background and apply it to home brewing. So it was something that I had been doing for quite a while, and I think, we just started doing it a ton in San Francisco. And one of the things I kept going back up to Oregon, Bend, Oregon in particular. And one of the things I originally came to San Francisco in, I think it was like for college in like 1997 or 96 or something. So I've been a resident of San Francisco for a long time, like 27 something years. And,
you've been here forever at that point,
yeah, I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere in my life, which is actually kind of a surprise. I never really thought I would be here this long, but one of the things I kept going back to Oregon because it's kind of like a grounding place for me in all my various careers. I would always kind of go back there just to sort of check in with, the beer scene and nature, and I snowboard and get up there all the time. And one of the things I noticed, kind of like in that, I don't know, like I was homebrewing, it was the mid 2000s, and I'd go up to Oregon and then I'd come back to San Francisco. And as you mentioned earlier, in San Francisco, the beer scene was very much at the time, there was maybe a dozen like breweries ish, and they were either production breweries, so like Speakeasy, Anchor, those ones that just package, as you mentioned before, or there were brew pubs, like Gordon Biersch was really popular at the time, and Magnolia and Thirsty Bear, where you have brew pubs are basically producing beer just for on-site consumption for the most part. And typically they run parallel or secondary to a restaurant. And in Oregon, there were many other places that like kind of like really featured beer as the forefront. It was a brewery and tap room with like kind of like food as like a complement, but not the forefront. And it was kind of like I guess more of like a brewery and beer bar kind of vibe. And there were several of those up in Oregon. And, we just kept like going back and forth, really noticing that there wasn't that in San Francisco. It was just kind of like one of these two polarized ends. You either had to be a really restaurant focused thing or be like a big giant, like production brewery that was distributing beer, like a few brands, maybe 4 or 5 as far and wide as possible. And so we really felt like, hey, there's this really interesting sort of gap in San Francisco, and having been a resident here for so long and really wanting to build that community of like bringing people in who really engage in, like having a wider variety of rotating beers on tap and having customers engage in it. That was kind of the concept that we felt like was missing. And I think I had kind of a businessy background. So the idea was, I was just going to start talking to a lot of people and just sort of, because, it's silly to think that you can go from a home brewer to a commercial brewer and run a business and it just be all simple and easy. But so I started talking to a lot of people. Brian Hunt from Moonlight was one of them. Tony Lawrence, who owns Boneyard Brewing up in Bend, was another mentor that I really leaned on heavily. Dave McLean, several others that I would just start talking to people. And it's a lot, actually, when we talk about it later in this discussion, it's a lot of what I'm doing right now, because I'm reassessing the market because my brewery burned down. And it's a lot of what I'm doing now is just talking to a ton of people, just trying to like, understand, if there's an opportunity to move forward, if there isn't. And that was a lot of what I was doing when I was really, picking your brain and talking to other people too. And at the same time, you really build relationships in that process and really understand, what you're getting into. And I eventually then ended up speaking with, I actually did a similar sort of thing, which I did with you, an informational interview kind of thing with Brendan Doble, who is the brewmaster at Thirsty Bear, and his, Ron, who is Silverstein, who is the owner of Thirsty Bear. The two of them were super interested in just sort of giving me information. And that's the one thing I love about the beer community, is that people are so willing to share information.
For sure.
So
I think anyone who gets in, it's like, whoa, like I don't know if it's as much now, but when I got in, it'd be like, man, this beer is great. They'd be like, hey, do you want the recipe? Oh, here, do you want my shirt? Like whatever, right? Like you can have the recipe because you're going to brew it on a different system. So it's probably going to be different. There's too many variables involved.
Absolutely. There wasn't that. And that was the same thing. I did a similar sort of thing with connections up at Deschutes Brewery. Like they gave me my favorite sort of, I say my gateway craft beer is the Black Butte Porter from Deschutes. Yeah. And so I try to brew that as a home brewer, and like literally, I have so many connections there. Many of them have moved on because this was like, 2008 or something or 7. But they just gave me the recipe to Black Butte Porter. And I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing, And I didn't even think it was going to be the same. It didn't matter. It was more just like, I'm just being given this information to help promote my learning. And that to me was just so amazing, because I love to learn and all that sort of stuff. So, but one of the things that I did take away, going back to your question about my home brewing and how sort of I transitioned over, is that getting other opinions. Like if you home brew beer, like your friends are going to tell you, even if your beer is a pile of shit, they're going to be like, great, it's free beer. Especially back at that time, people were just, it was such a creative time. And this was, like I said, about 2008 through 2010. In San Francisco, it was such a really unique time. There was SF Underground Market. I don't know if you remember that, but it was basically, there was this really sort of like underground, like small, the food trucks weren't as big at the time. People were just trying to figure out ways to like have their like really amazing, like Vietnamese, or dim sum or whatever kind of like super special, like they make these amazing meals and they just can't necessarily, they don't have the money to build a commercial kitchen or a restaurant. And so there were these things. Issa Rabins, he's a good friend of mine. He was the one who started SF Underground Market, where he would have like one night every quarter, he would, rent out a warehouse and people could come there and have this food that they couldn't get anywhere else. Which also was kind of like, blurring the lines of legality, right?
Yeah,
but
because like generally you need a license, right? That was the old school thinking of breweries, is that, well, you got to have a license and you're not going to sell your, the license says as a brew pub, you can't package it and sell it out. Like all those things were so much stricter, I guess, or they were just beholden to like this standard of gold where you just would not fuck with it or think outside that box,
Right. Well, and that's the thing with the SF Underground Market. They were holding these food events where people normally you have to have a commercial kitchen to produce, or commissary kitchen to produce food that you can actually give to the public, right? So that everybody knows you're not going to get sick and all that sort of stuff. And so, but the thing is that it was really curated quite well. And it was a platform to like do things like we did homebrew workshops. We never sold our beer, but whatever, we basically said, hey, we'll teach you how to homebrew. Come in here, and by the way, you can taste our beer. And our whole process was we had feedback cards. So we would basically say, okay, you got to give us feedback. And again, that goes back to some of the advice that you gave us, which was go get opinions from other people. And then that's how we also ended up, bringing 3-gallon kegs to Dolores Park.
I said 5, 3, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I was
later it'll be a half barrel. You were just like hauling a half barrel in your back just right through the park.
I was going to say I should have taken credit for having a 5-gallon on my back, but actually it was 2 3-gallon kegs in a rolling cooler. But I mean, it worked, and that's the thing. I mean, we did these little tastings. We had people fill out the it wasn't like giant pints, whatever, and people would fill out these feedback cards, and it would basically give us, an overall idea of not only like was the beer good, but like what styles did like people want, and in the end, Dave McLean also gave me the same advice. This is totally illegal. You're doing wrong, but this is also like at the pinnacle of like Twitter had just come out. Right. And so like Instagram wasn't even really a thing. So it was just this whole, like, kind of like, we just want to get our name out there, get some feedback without spending a ton of money. And then that's how I ended up then approaching, we got some great feedback from the park. We did that, I don't know, maybe like a half dozen times, something like that. And then, we ended up then taking some of the results of that feedback to Thirsty Bear, Ron and Brendan. And for 2010, I basically pitched to them, hey, like, can we brew this, like popular black IPA, scale it up for SF Beer Week? We will promote you guys for like kind of like helping this underground, like whatever, like startup getting going, and you guys can just help us refine this recipe. And then at the same time, I was working full time. So on the weekends, I'd go help Brendan out. He taught me the ropes in the brewery, which he's great. He's done that with, I mean, probably a dozen people, taught them how to brew. Right. And so, he was so great. I remember him completely laughing at my recipe, just saying, this is ridiculous, but we'll do it. And, that's what you need. You need people like that too. And, one of the things that I think is, again, in the beer industry, it's really interesting. Some people, I think majority is that people are willing to let people experiment, make mistakes, and kind of learn from those lessons, right? Rather than, I come from kind of a physics background where people are like, no, there's a right answer and you're doing it wrong. I think that's a very closed-minded, viewpoint. And I think especially in a beer industry or any business industry, you have to be willing to sort of push the boundaries of what's okay in order to grow and innovate. So that's kind of the background of, I guess, how I sort of got my foot in the door, if you will.
Which is amazing, because in the list of people you've talked about, like you talked to some pretty old school brewers, right? Who, I mean, including me, was like, what are you doing? That's, you're outside the box. You're going to make a black IPA. Are you crazy? Like it's just all of it. Like I can hear Brendan actually laughing and being like, all right, okay, I'm going to help you with this,
Right.
Like, your list of people, of mentors is fantastically awesome, and all definitely old school brewers.
Yeah, I think it's always really important. Again, just for my philosophy, I think it's really important to surround yourself with people that have different opinions than yours. And that's how you end up sort of coming to, a go forward solution that maybe is a blend of I don't know if they call it groupthink or whatever, but I'm just a person who really likes to listen to people and their experiences. And I'm always so grateful for people sharing their information. Like I said, it's a huge thing I love about this industry.
Yeah. I mean, I think, definitely it's not like you're not the first home brewer who's owned a brewery, like that's
Right.
And every home brewer I think has a different come to that place, right? How did I get here? Some of them do it really well, and some of them just have a bunch of money or whatever it is, right? Like,
right.
It runs the whole gamut of that. And I mean, I remember just being really impressed and being like, all right, man, you're coming at this in a way that I've never even thought about, or I've never seen anybody do it, and I was like, you have a ton of energy. I mean, we had like an 8-hour drinking / conversation.
Oh yeah.
/ interview,
yeah.
or whatever you want to call it. But and then it was pretty quiet for a while, and then I started to hear, I'd hear your name come up here and there, and like you said, being part of the beer week thing, I'm sure gave you guys a ton of visibility.
Yeah, that was super. It was great because people really like that beer. But then one of the things that we did to try to get that validation with the customer market. Again, coming from a business background, I've always been very customer centric. Like, I just feel like, I'm definitely not one of those brewers that's like, I'm just going to brew whatever I want to brew and people will drink it. And if they don't like it, they can fuck off. I'm definitely not one of those people. That said, I do like to brew beers that I like, but I'm just like I don't know, I'm just a business person like that. I like to hear what customers want, and it actually challenges me to maybe do things that I don't want to do. And that makes me learn something. And so one of the things that we did early on after that first sort of people were like, oh, cool, Black IPA with Thirsty Bear. We were trying to then raise money for our brick and mortar. And we did this thing. I don't even know if anyone remembers Kickstarter nowadays. I mean, right. GoFundMe kind of took everything over, but Kickstarter at the time was very brand new. And it was, again, 2010 or 11. And with Kickstarter, it was the same crowdfunding, kind of platform thing, but you had to reach a certain goal in order to get money. And so and I think there were maybe 1 or 2 breweries that had used it at the time. And they were putting in I need $10,000 to start my brewery. And I'm just like, fuck off. I do not want to be held accountable to start a brewery for $10,000. Right. So we did this whole thing. We did a marketing campaign. We did a video. I went to Ron and Brendan at Thirsty Bear. I said, I want to do another beer. And here's what I want to do. I want to brew another beer here. I want to coincide it with this Kickstarter campaign. And we're going to try to raise, I can't remember what it was. It was maybe $35,000 or something like that. You still can't start a brewery for $35,000.
Right. Like something that seems like a lot, right?
Yeah. But it's
these strangers are going to give me $35,000. That's a lot.
Right.
Not enough,
yeah.
but a lot.
But I wanted to try to be yeah, whatever, at least, or maybe it was, I don't remember what it was. I think it was 35 or whatever. But point is, I was like, okay, we're going to coincide the launch of this beer with Kickstarter. And then that'll give us more visibility, and we'll be able to then use that to go get real investors. And then one of the things I realized, we're kind of first mover in that space. We got so many people to come to our events. We did events at Rosa Monday, at Thirsty Bear, at all these other places. And mind you, we're not taking any money from this. This is Thirsty Bear's getting all the money. We're just showing up at this saying, hey, this is the kind of beer that we could produce if we owned a brewery. But we realized that, a lot of people just didn't understand it. They thought that all the money from the beer was going to our fundraising campaign. And so I think we only ended up raising $20,000, and then a lot. So we didn't get any money.
Oh, shit.
And then, yeah. And then, people were just like, but your beer is great. And so, it was just a really great, we tried something new. We got the word out, but it was kind of just a really big sort of lesson learned about being too far ahead of the kind of the curve, and just being people just don't understand that connective tissue between okay, I'm having this beer, but it's actually not going to fund this. I have to then go to so anyway, it was a lesson learned. And, those things are great. I mean, GoFundMe wasn't really around at that time. GoFundMe, the difference is basically you just get whatever money is donated to you. But yeah, it was just an interesting experience, but we learned a lot from it. And in the end, we just ended up getting kind of went the route of classic raising, investment money. And that's how we ended up opening local.
I mean, but it gave you a ton of marketing, right? Like, so when I opened the Good Hop, which is about around the same time, we were looking for money around the same time. And I picked Indiegogo because Kickstarter, if you didn't make the money, they kept it all, right? And Indiegogo was like, if you make the money, you get it. And we take, 4%. But if you don't make the money, we're going to kick you while you're down and we're going to take like 15%, right? Like, you didn't get all the money and we're going to take a little bit more.
Right. That's right. I forgot about Indiegogo. That was the one that was like, the good way to go for sure.
Yeah. But it was, and also like people were like, was that all the money you need to open the bar? And I was like, no, it wasn't even close. But look at, 150 people I don't even know gave me money, which is a marketing thing, right? So for you guys, even though maybe it didn't work out as you thought it was going to work out, but you ended up with this troop of people who the public who knew who you were. So I mean, in theory, I would hope that once you opened, they'd be like, oh my God, they're back, or, they're here, like, we're going to go. And
yeah, it was definitely good in the sense that we had contact information from people that were interested. So when we did end up opening, I mean, that's also something that we learned kind of the hard way, is that we wanted to think that San Francisco wasn't as transient as it is. And when I say transient, I mean, like, the people that live in San Francisco, it's a very transient community in the sense that people come and they live here for 1 to 2 years and then they bounce out. I mean, it's a completely different story now, but in the sense that most people have left. But earlier
they aren't coming here.
Right. It's now just a one-way path. There isn't an incoming, there's just outgoing. But but yeah, I mean, I think that was the thing. Like, when we ended up raising money or trying to raise money in Kickstarter, that was in 2011, maybe 2012, like at the latest. And we didn't open local until 2015, but we still had that email list, but half the people were already gone. So, I mean, that's one of the things that I learned too, is San Francisco and urban breweries, especially, I mean, I haven't owned a brewery in another urban environment. I did learn, though, in San Francisco, that you have to constantly, again, going back to being customer centric, you have to constantly earn your customers over and over again. You don't have you have those regulars for 1 to 2 years and then they leave. It's not like you're in Oregon. You can't compare it to like places where people like, have like decided to like nest the rest of their lives. So those were like lessons that I feel like are really, really specific to urban breweries that I feel like are also really interesting to look at now. 8 years later, it's a totally different kind of situation. But yeah, those are just like really interesting lessons that we learned along the way.
Yeah. I bet, and it's changed even since then, right? Like, we all know COVID changed everything. So
yeah,
even from then, I'm sure and we'll talk about this in the second half, but like, what's your next step? And I'm sure all of those first time lessons before COVID and after COVID have informed you in every single way,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But I did want to go back. I know, in SF, like, I was a brewer in SF for a while, and the Brewers Guild was kind of one of the first guilds. Like, Denver had a Brewers Guild before that, but I know that the Brewers Guild in San Francisco came about from a bunch of brewers speaking. And you mentioned that you were on that board for a while. I think, and actually, in talking to Kat, she's very much not necessarily about the making of the wort, but the community behind it, right? So I think I'd love to hear more about the guild and how that operates. I know lots of people in the Bay Area have opinions on either side of that. We don't have to light on it for a long time, but
sure.
I don't know when your time was that you were there. Was it at the very beginning when that guild formed, or maybe give us a little background of what the guild's purpose is and kind of how you got involved or why you got involved?
Sure. No, I think it's great. I mean, one of the things, again, I came from, I'm not going to say necessarily a corporate background, but I came from kind of a business and innovative background in science and engineering and business. And I had done things like mentoring, whether it be students or employees or people I managed or the other groups. And when I opened up our brick and mortar in 2015 on Bluxom Street, an opportunity. I mean, again, my mentors that I had really leaned on and still do to this day, Dave McLean, Rob Ron Silverstein. Those were two, really key people for me. Again, Ron Silverstein was the owner of Thirsty Bear. Thirsty Bear closed, but it was open for 25 years. It closed during COVID. Dave McLean opened up Magnolia Brewing, whom I know that you work with, and he's been in the scene forever. Those two actually started the guild to really bring together and cultivate the San Francisco brewing community, and that was in the early 2000s, I believe. So you have to check with me on the numbers when they started it, but they literally started it with I think it was Brews on the Bay, which is an event, like a festival event on the SF Jeremiah O'Brien on the Bay, which is awesome. And it was basically just to bring together that community, because San Francisco, really at the time, again, only had maybe a dozen breweries. So it's to bring together the community of brewers, but also figure a way where they could fund, again, it's a guild, it's nonprofit. So they just wanted to fund these festival events so they could pay the SS Jeremiah O'Brien to rent out that space to do a festival, and, so kind of a one or two. And then eventually it moved into the SF Beer Week Gala, which, back originally it was such a small event, but I think we all know it now as this huge mammoth event that brought together the entire Bay. Right. But at the time it was relatively small and very bootstrapped, like a lot of things are in the beer community. I came aboard where, again, I think at the time when I opened local in 2015, there was a lot of my types of breweries that were spinning up, like Harmonic and Black Hammer and Cellarmaker, and all these the concept that I said that we were trying to do with local was, it turns out we weren't the only ones that saw that opportunity or that concept. And so there were many breweries that opened up with that kind of similar vibe in that same sort of time, 2 to 3 year time frame, like 2014, I'll say, to 2017. I think we went from 12 breweries in San Francisco to I think in 2017 it was 30. There were so many. It was just an explosion, right? One of the things that we did a little bit differently is that we had a small kitchen concept. Many of the other breweries were just sort of a brewery and beer bar, tap room kind of thing with no food. They would maybe rely on food trucks or whatever. But anyway, my point is that I volunteered. They needed additional board members for the guild. At the time, the guild had grown from 10 breweries to 30. And now you need to have more board members. Originally it was just Ron and Dave and then maybe one other. And then they went from having 3 board members to 5. And so when I opened local, I volunteered, or no, somebody nominated me, I think, to be on the board as a new member. I think somebody was outgoing. And somebody nominated me, and it was my first year. And I'm like, sure, I'm here for this. And when you're on the board, you volunteer your time and all that sort of stuff. But I had been in these environments before. I was I'd been specifically a lot in tech and building website stuff. So I knew I could provide some value in the tech space. And so that's how I got on the board. I think it was nominated in that 2016, 2015 year time frame. And then your board time frame is 3 years. That's the time, usually, unless you decide that you want to, whatever, you can re-up and be on a ballot to be voted to go back in and do another term. But I ended up just bowing out at the end of my 3-year term. But it's, the pivotal time that I was on the board with Ron, Dave, Phil Cuddy, who is now at Speakeasy Hunters Point, but was at Headlands, and then Mike, who was a co-founder of Fort Point. We're the head brewer. So it was the 5 of us, and we were all on the board at the pivotal time when it went from the San Francisco Brewers Guild to the Bay Area Brewers Guild. And the main difference there is that we went from a city-based guild to a regional-based guild with multiple chapters, which was a big transition.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, it was a very pivotal time. It is now the Bay Area's Brewers Guild instead of the San Francisco Brewers Guild. There was a lot of kind of back and forth discussion. The guilds are amazing in the sense, especially in the brewing community. They're so great for marketing, community building. We used to have these like brewer meetup days. I think one of the biggest things that has been missing, post COVID and post sort of the expansion of the guild from SF Brewers Guild to the Bay Area Brewers Guild, is that there aren't these like community gatherings, brewers, and
Right.
that's literally the result of COVID in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I still think there are ways in which brewers are connecting now digitally, which is great, through the guild's resources. But yeah, it's amazing in the sense that it brings people together, brings communities together, and ultimately it brings awareness to the general public around individual brewery events, which is super important.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, it went from 10, 12 breweries to 30 to the Bay Area, which is, well, now probably over 100. I don't know, 80.
Oh yeah, definitely over 100. Yeah,
Yeah. It's a lot. So, I part of my brewing upbringing was in Denver, Colorado, and they had a guild there. So
Mhm.
I was vaguely familiar with it. It was like my first job there, and I got out here, and it was like, oh, a guild, right? Like, what's their function? What do they do? How, are they just put on events and take money? No, they do other things. It's the community aspect of it. So thank you for talking about it, because I think, everyone has an opinion about whatever they think is working or not working, and sometimes
Yeah.
people just don't know what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, that is the one point of like, I think that I've learned as I've left being on the board, is that in talking to more people about the guild in the industry, is that a lot of people don't understand the purpose of the guild. I mean, that sounds like in the sense that like a lot of brewers and beer industry people don't know where the money goes from these events. And that's the part that I feel like is definitely, the money is going towards producing other events and marketing and actually having a website that promotes that goes through your website and puts the things that are happening at your brewery or at your tap room, and they make it available. That's where the money goes. It's not necessarily a money making or profit making thing. I just think that the reality of the situation is that a lot of people that are on the guild, whether or not it's board or otherwise, they're volunteering their time, and they don't necessarily have expertise in the places of business awareness and communication and marketing and all the things that go into running a business. I mean, in the end, it's not a profitable business, but it is a business. And sometimes you need to like figure out, okay, who is contributing to providing that money for you, and how do you communicate to them where that money is going? And I think that's a big opportunity for guilds going forward, is being able to share that information, because we all are participating in those sorts of things. So
Right, for sure. Well, cool. So it looks like we are at a perfect point for a break. And I look forward to the next half of this show, chatting with you about totally different topics.
awesome.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Discover the advantage of using new and unique ingredients like lemon myrtle or lapsang souchong. First Tea has been working with brewers to introduce distinctive, high-quality botanicals for innovative craft beers. They focus on being direct, flexible, and fast. You can find more about First Tea's collaborations with brewers and tea ingredients by visiting blog.firsttea.com. That's blog.firstea.com.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
All righty, we're back for the second half. My name is Melissa Myers, and I am talking to Regan Long, the co-founder and brewmaster of Local Brewing Company in San Francisco, California. Real quick beer shout out, because we're probably going to run into these in a little bit, but we've had a first half. I've had my first beer. You've had your first beer.
Yeah.
What are you going to drink next?
Well, I'm giving a shout out again to another one of our collaborative brews. I'm drinking the Olfactory. It's called Locally Real. It's our collaboration that we did with them for Beer Week. It's a double IPA. Olfactory, if you don't know, it's a new brewery in San Francisco, started up by a couple of guys. Well, the primary like head brewer, lead brewer is Phil, who Emerson, who was the brewmaster at Almanac, and then Max, who was a brewer at Almanac and a couple other places, and then Trevor and Bobby. So they're here in the city. I love to support people that are bold enough to open up in 2021. So in San Francisco. So
For sure.
having a double IPA. What are you doing?
Well, that beer is fantastic. It's on the shelves at the Good Hop. Should any of these
Cool.
listeners be local and looking for it, we have very few left, but it's up there. I'm actually drinking a Gravity Drops from Wayfinder.
Ooh,
I was inspired by your black IPA, and this is a Baltic style porter. So,
ooh, cool.
The second half of here. All right. Well, so thank you first of all for chatting with me today. This has been awesome, and I'm stoked to be able to pin. We kind of dropped on how you got here. I think the guild information is fascinating. As you said, like not everybody knows what it does exactly, and every guild probably runs slightly differently, but I think it's great for people who are in the industry or getting into the industry who are like, what the fuck is a guild?
Yeah.
So thank you for chatting with me about that. I know sometimes it feels a little sticky or tricky because, people don't necessarily know what's going on. But for the second half, I really, really wanted to talk about what's happening with you. If you want to give us a little bit of background about what happened in December. I know, we all went through COVID, and I think some breweries struggled. We saw some disappear. You mentioned Thirsty Bear closed during COVID. I think you and I had a chat somewhere in like end of 2020, 2021 of like, holy shit, like things changed a lot. And, we just went through 2 years. It feels like a decade. And you guys made it through to only, in December, have your brewery go down the way it went down. So I'll let you give the information on that so that I don't give any misinformation, but maybe tell us kind of what happened. I'm very curious about your initial week after that. I'm sure you were just like, holy shit. And then chat a little bit about what's next for you.
Sure. Well, so again, just want to circle back and say thank you so much for inviting me to have this conversation with you. I'm a big fan, and so having this conversation to touch on a few of these topics is really great. It's it's been fun. I mean, this latter part of the conversation, it's still a little, it's interesting because I'll be introduced to somebody or whatever, and they're like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I own a brewery. Oh, wait, no, I owned a brewery, but it burned down. I'm over it. I'm not over it. But
I almost changed your bio. I was gonna be like, no, because it says something about how it was on Bluxom Street. And I'm like, whoa, the brewery still exists. Come on. And I'm like, no, that's what you said. I'm not gonna change it.
I know. I mean, I think too, I also should have shortened that thing down. But I mean, I had to put that in there. I literally, so this week, last Friday, was the opening home opener for the Giants. And we used to be, so Bluxom Street was located, or local was located on Bluxom Street, which is a couple blocks from the ballpark. And so we were kind of the off the beaten path, local spot for pre-gaming the Giants games. And people are just now learning that, my brewery basically, for folks that don't know on this. So I was in a local is in a historical building on Bluxom Street. It's a 2-block long street located, again, just downtown Soma, a couple blocks from the ballpark between 4th and 5th on Bluxom, between Townsend and Brandon. And so it was kind of definitely a local pregame, Giant spot. It was, we built it custom, down to plugs in the wall, built all the plumbing, electrical, HVAC, completely custom to our design of a 10-barrel brewery and beer bar eatery in 2015. The building is actually based in, it was defined in San Francisco as a historical building, I think built in 1912. And so there was a top floor, there was a neighboring business in the same building. It was a screen printing shop that had been there for 30 years. And then there was a floor above us that was basically artists, painters, sculptors, things like that. Like the original owner of the building was very adamant about trying to create a very cheap space for artists to still stay in San Francisco. We came in 2015. So those people had all been in the building forever. And we came in the bottom right-hand corner of that building in 2015 and built it all out to 2015 San Francisco code. So we had fire sprinklers, we had everything, literally.
No grandfathered in for you in any way.
No, it was like literally, nothing. It was actually a super intense process to be permitted and go into that building. I think post-COVID, just going into that really quick, like South of Market neighborhood in San Francisco was really hit hard. Our Pinterest, their headquarters is across the street from us. We had Adobe up the street, Stripe, all the tech companies. That was our bread and butter. Monday through Friday was these after work tech people that would come in wanting beers. They didn't want to go to a bar. We didn't serve any hard alcohol. It was just our beer and just food and bites and a really cool, we built our spot to be kind of like a cool, like innovative, like, whatever, like modern vibey spot. And so we got to be known as this like really great destination spot, but post-COVID, that neighborhood got wiped out. So we were pretty much, really struggling post-COVID. So, there wasn't the foot traffic. A lot of those tech companies just never returned to their offices. But we still were sort of like limping along. We had our outdoor space post-COVID, but yeah, I mean, basically, December, got called the night of December 3rd, early morning, December. Yeah, it was basically like 2 a.m. on December 3rd. We were notified by our security service and our fire service that something was going on to local, and we had cameras everywhere. So popped on my phone, just saw smoke in the camera. So I drove down there. And I got down there to see like 5 fire trucks, 70 something firefighters, basically the top floor of the building. It wasn't in my brewery, the bottom floor, the top floor. A fire had started at the very, very back of the building in one of the artist studios. It was because there was no infrastructure on that top floor. Like there wasn't really any electrical, there was no fire prevention, there was no nothing. It went down like kindling. It was just like I said, a historical building, all timber. There wasn't any like, cement or like one of the things, we had a storage office on the top floor that I had to lease out when we built out the space because our glycol was on the roof. And we had to lease out a space on the second floor to build a stack for our venting for our brew house and to support the glycol on the roof. And when we built the space, we had to make that stack put into fireproof drywall. And right. So literally on the second floor, everything was char except the stack.
You're like,
that took my brew. Yeah, it just took my brewery vents all the way to the roof. That was still there. They did say so. The fire was so intense in the back of the building that the roof collapsed. It actually collapsed all the way to the point to where we had to structurally, again, because we built our space in 2015, we had to structurally support the glycol on the roof and add support there. So the roof collapsed up until where our equipment was because we had to build extra support for our equipment. So if that hadn't been there, the rest of the roof would have collapsed and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it was super, super tragic. I mean, the reality of the situation is that the firefighters said they used hundreds of thousands of gallons of water to put out the fire. All the water came down through the floor slats. And that's our damage to our brewery is smoke damage and predominantly water damage. It's just been a really kind of tragic situation. It's
made it through COVID, right? Like you made it through COVID.
Yeah, I know. It's surreal. I mean, you asked about the first couple of weeks and it was unbelievably surreal. I think for the first, I can kind of talk about it now. I used to I still break down. I went down there for opening day because the amazing peeps of the Giants, we have great relationships with them, invited me down for opening day. And I parked in my driveway of the brewery because you
You're
know,
like, well, at
the
least I
insurance,
have this parking space.
at least I have a parking space. And then, came back and went in there, had a beer and just like bawled my face off. It was terrible, because it's like, this was like my, the opening week was like our biggest opening week, and so it's just, there's still no roof on the space. So all the rain has come through. So it's moldy. As a brewer, it's like the worst situation that you can imagine.
Like, I just need a pressure washer in like 5 weeks.
Yeah, seriously. And that's the thing, like, I can't even, go into it. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it was the first like week or two, I would wake up in the middle of the night thinking it was like a nightmare, So, I mean, it's just, it was very surreal. So that's what happened. But
I bet. So, on like a, I mean, we'll talk about like maybe what you're thinking about later, but like on a very technical equipment side of that, right? I mean, our tanks are stainless and water damage seems like that wouldn't hurt it. Like how much of your brewery is still in there? Has most of everything just been removed and it's just a space?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I haven't been through anything like this. So there's a huge, like right away, the first things, like for the first month, I had to kind of like put off even dealing with the trauma of it, because like there was like so because there was 2 primary businesses, there's actually a third business that was there. We all have insurance companies. And then there's the city, and everybody has their fire inspectors and their insurance companies and their adjusters, and everybody has to go through and assess, and you can't touch anything, the firefighters, you can't go in, whatever.
Like you're like, can I just go get that beer that's still good? I just want to get it out of there,
Oh yeah. I mean, the night of, I was there and I was just not even connecting to it. And the firefighters there, and there's literally a fire station right across the street. I don't know if you know that, but the dudes from Engine 8 came over, and they're like friends. They know local. They were helping putting out the fire. And I'm just like giving them cases of beer. I'm just like, take it. And they're like, they were so thankful, but like, that was my thing. Like, I just kind of didn't process. I was like, just take it, whatever. But I was like, we'll be open in a month or whatever. But
right, you're like, thanks, we'll see you in a little while.
yeah. I was in the hospitality mode where you just take care of your customers, and it was like 3 a.m. and the top floor of my like above my brewery, it was literally like lit up. Yeah. It's just kind of a weird, like coping situation. But yeah. So, I mean, I'm like losing my train of thought. Where were we going here?
But like the physical part, I mean,
the actual.
It's only April, right? I'm assuming there's still a ton of insurance shit happening, and
so
you just can't make it move faster whether you want it to or not.
That's the thing. We've been in this like really like weird holding pattern right away. There was like, I had to deal with like all those like investigators, insurance people. Then you have to like provide all of the invoices of the build out and the equipment and everything. Like, and I hadn't looked at that shit in 7 years. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there was this immediate, like, just sort of like, just juggling paperwork. And
where is everything that I need?
Right. Yeah. And so, as far as the equipment goes, like in the meantime, like literally they're saying, don't touch the space. It's still like, don't touch the space as of today, but they're just now signing off. Like ultimately the equipment, the stainless is probably fine. The reality is there's no power to the building. It's been literally open to the sky and it's moldy and gross. All of the like furniture and equipment and things like that have rusted. That isn't stainless. The wood is all, the bars, all whatever. The stainless could be is salvageable. The kegs are like salvageable, but that's pretty much it. Some of the stuff that, like, it's just so strange, like things like gaskets and valves. We had all these sandy buckets with everything everywhere. Yeah. And then like, and then it's just, I don't know. It's just it's so weird because you want to keep that stuff like clean and sanitized. It's just like, is it going to be good if I just like burn it later? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's
totally.
You know what I mean? Like,
are those clamps going to be okay? Like, I just want to get them clean again,
Like, and it's like, I've literally thought about this as we potentially think about using this equipment going forward. Like, I know it, like, scientifically, you burn it, you boil it, all that sort of stuff, it'll be fine. But like, am I gonna be okay with that psychologically knowing? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. So it's an interesting kind of like place to be in. So we'll see. But
I'm sure. Like, remember seeing like your first video or two. I know that when you were starting to open local, to be a brewer, that you got to brew at other breweries, right? Like you got to make a
Yeah.
beer on a larger scale. I don't know if it was a pro-am
Mhm.
competition or whatever. And I had seen a post. I know that you have a pretty awesome connection with Pond Farm, I
Oh
believe.
yeah.
Is
Mhm.
that correct? Right? Pond Farm.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe they came and brewed with you
Mhm.
when they were trying to get open, right? And I'd
Right.
seen you got to do a collab with them, and I was like, yes, like
Yeah.
it all
Yeah.
circles
Yeah.
back around.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
and I know that you've been like, you're drinking a collab right now. And I've seen, you're clearly still actively, collabing with people and, I'm sure one, just keeping in the industry and still getting to brew and be in brew houses and keep the local brewing name alive. But you've mentioned a couple of things like San Francisco landscape has changed pretty drastically since COVID.
Yeah.
You and I don't know if it's a possibility for you to go back into the original location. Maybe that's not worth it. Knowing you and the innovation that you're like, I'm just keep talking to people. I just keep talking to people, like who do you
Yeah.
find yourself talking to now more about this, right? Obviously you know how to brew and you know how to open a brewery, you know how to do all of those things. You've already done it, but
Mhm.
like who do you talk to now, or who do you find, like what kind of questions do you find yourself asking old mentors or new mentors in a situation where you're like, well, am I going to redo all this again? Am I going to, are we going to start over, not quite from scratch? Like, obviously, more, you've got more experience, but,
Yeah.
like, what do you find the conversations you're having right now?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. I have been talking with quite a few people. I think the collaboration stuff I think has been really amazing. And that kind of really just stemmed from like post COVID and during COVID. During COVID, I was really just forced to literally, as you do everything at your place of business, right? And so
Totally.
I had really no choice but to put everything, my entire life, into local to keep it alive during COVID. And also one of the things that was great once we all started being able to go out and be around other people is that again, going back to the guild thing, it was filling the gap by doing these collaborations. We were sort of like, as brewers, we're social people. And so, you wanted to, like, instead of like going to an event and drinking beer with people, you're going to an event and actually brewing beer with other brewers, which was a fun excuse to just see each other. And I think that, I did, I don't know, something like 15, 16 collaborations in 2021. And then it just sort of extended 2021, 22, extended into this phase where I had already had several collaborations in line to do for that pre-beer week thing. Beer week,
Right.
for again those who don't know, it's like early February every year, and the fire happened in December. So I did 4 or 5 collaborations in January that were already kind of on the books.
Right. Like you're lining that stuff up in December, November, whatever. We all talk about ahead of time, right? We know it's coming.
Right. Yeah,
So,
exactly. So those things were happening, and that's what I've been drinking here. But I think that the just going back to like just that camaraderie, it's been super great for me to be able to go to these collaborative events and pink boots events and things like that, where I can just as much as I can try to connect people. That's what I'm really trying to do as much as I can now, is connect people and like, having a lot of different connections in the industry, give people more opportunities and exposures to other, brewers and collaborations and stuff. It's been a really great thing for me to focus my time on at this point. But yeah, San Francisco is hard. I mean, when I talk about people or when you ask about people that I'm speaking to now, like I'm meeting with John Martin tomorrow. That's been on the books forever. He's the owner of Drake's and Bear
right.
Republic. He's been
An
through
an
fires.
amazing businessman, by the way.
Yeah. We've been talking about meeting for a while. Just talked to Sean O'Sullivan and Dick Cantwell the other day. I'm talking to, Tony Lawrence. He's been a forever, advisor. I think, the other thing that I'm doing too is like really have a pulse on a lot of the brewing community and connections there. I think, there are 2 things that are really challenging when I look at trying to reassess the market in general right now, and then reassess it on a more micro scale in San Francisco. San Francisco everywhere is tough with labor, but San Francisco is really, really tough with labor. And it was before. I listened to a podcast that somebody did with me in 2018, and I said my main issue was staffing, and it's even worse now. And, when I talk to a lot of brewers these days, people are having a hard time, and, and I think it's not only just money, but it's again that lack of camaraderie and like a lot of people are in the beer industry because they're passionate and they love their connections, but if those connections aren't there, if that's not happening, then it's kind of like, I think a little bit of that passion is lost. And so those are things I'm just listening to. I mean, you can open up a business, but if you don't have a team behind you, it's just worth nothing, So So
Well, and I think, it's like you said, like you would talk to maybe a brewer at a beer festival, right? And the beer festivals are coming back slowly.
Mm-hmm.
They're coming back, but a lot of those connections where you just start talking to somebody about whatever, because you're at an event, you both happen to be at the same event, right? And what comes out of that is, a collaboration where it's just the two of you and you get to have, or not just the two, but it's like a smaller group and you get to have these conversations that spiral out farther than just, I'm standing here handing somebody a beer who doesn't necessarily know who we are or whatever, right? Like,
right.
Or you're not in the middle of marketing your beer because this person doesn't know who you are. And now you're having this conversation with the brewer. You're like, I just really want to go have this side conversation over here, And,
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think that's the beauty of the collabs. When I opened the bar, I really miss brewing, and people be like, how are the collabs? And I'm like, here's the thing. Like, I'm at somebody else's brew house. Like, I'm not gonna be like, hey, I'm gonna grab this hose and go over here and hook up this pump and I'll see you later. Like their brew house. I can't do that.
Yeah.
And in the end, it's like this pretty beautiful 8-hour day where you vaguely pay attention to the beer, but you have these crazy conversations, from anywhere about ingredients or building, that you had to reinforce a cement stack to put your glycol in, like whatever, right? Where someone else is like, oh, okay, yeah, I got to do that too, or whatever it is. So I commend you for going through what you just went through since December, but also holding on to actually what got you here in the first place, right? Which is chatting your ass off with all of the right people and finding the best mentors,
I think, it's part of it. And I think that the other side of it too, is that I feel like what I'm trying to do now too, is like give back that information and make some connections for people that like was done for me. You know what I mean? It's like, it's that pay it forward kind of thing. It's like, if there's anything I can do for people at this point, like I have time to do that. And I love that, again, sharing that information. I am so thankful to all the people that have been a part of like helping me get to open up my spot and be there for like, 7-8 years. And it wasn't easy at the very beginning of it. Like, we talk about like some of the old school mentors that were just like, nah, you're not doing it right. And
that's never going to work.
It's right. Exactly. It's never going to work. But, it's been really interesting. A lot of those people have come around. A lot of those people understand that like it's an evolving thing. And so, as much as I can like share information, I try to do that and try to bring more people up, especially, again, in the space of like diversity and inclusion. That sounds all whatever, but I think you and I both know that like there needs to be that like safe space, and just sort of being able to say, yeah, I made a mistake and I need to like, I want to have a group of people that's going to like support me going forward and growing in the industry. And, at the moment, like I'm trying to like look at some potential relocation opportunities, maybe, but like what I really see is going forward is like just trying to support other people in the industry is what my main, sort of purpose is at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, it turns out, it's not just about brewing the liquid, right? Like this industry has just this vast depth that it spans out to all kinds of things, and I think that all of that is just as valuable as the person who brews the liquid. I mean,
absolutely.
Don't get me wrong, it's awesome to brew beer.
Oh yeah,
right.
I know, same. I love it. I miss it so much, actually.
Yeah, I feel you on that.
Yeah, I know. Are you getting to do any collabs lately or what?
I haven't actually been doing very many collabs. I came to it's been a long time since I've had my brew boots on in my own brewery. So it's a different experience when it's not your brewery. Always fun, great conversations, but it's a different experience. So
yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I'm living it. It's definitely different. I mean, at minimum, like I said, I'm like doing these collaborations. I'm just sitting back saying that ain't my pump. You guys know how those valves work. You're good.
Right. Or you'll be like, that pump, does it? Nope, you got it. It's cool. You got it.
It's running dry, but you got it.
Totally. Well, awesome, Regan. I want to thank you. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I'm really excited to turns out we've known each other for way longer um than it seems like. So I'm stoked to be able to chat with you. And I mean, I admire the fuck out of what you've done, and it seems like you've come, pretty full circle back to kind of, you know, reimagining whatever it is that you're going to do next. And I think you're going to be great for what
Well,
it's
thank
worth.
you again so much. I I always love like us like chopping it up. So this has been super fun. And yeah, thank you it's great like topics to talk about for sure. So really appreciate and admire what you're doing. So this has been a pleasure.
Nice. Well, we'll see what's next for both of us, apparently.
Yeah. I'm coming over at you. Don't worry about it. I'm getting on you.
All right. Well, you know what? Maybe we should come up with an event.
Oh, we should.
Something. We'll come up with some event at the Good Hop.
I'm coming over.
I was going to say we could brew, but it'd be the streets of Oakland we're brewing on.
I know. Believe me,
maybe we'll do something else.
we'll do something else. We'll do some sort of like drinking event for sure. I'm ready for it.
That sounds awesome. All right. So I want to say that Regan will be back on the next episode of this show. I'm handing the interviewer side over to her as the host, having a conversation with a brewer of your choosing. That will be on the air in 2 weeks make sure you tune in for that. Please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media and to support journalism in the beer space. Check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. I'm Melissa Myers. I want to thank you, Regan, for chatting with me today. And I want to thank y'all for listening to the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Cheers.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Discover the advantage of using new and unique ingredients like lemon myrtle or lapsang souchong. First Tea has been working with brewers to introduce distinctive, high-quality botanicals for innovative craft beers. They focus on being direct, flexible, and fast. You can find more about First Tea's collaborations with brewers and tea ingredients by visiting blog.firsttea.com. That's blog.firsttea.com.